Hey there, fellows. So look here, we got a car, a pothole, and as drivers, I'm sure we've all been there many times before. But let's assess the danger, what happens to a car and its wheel, at what speed, and let's do this. Okay, so we are ready. Up front, we're running 14s. Pressure's at 2 kilos. 13s in the rear, 1.8 kilos of pressure. And so let's see what sort of treatment will be given by this pothole to the wheels and, of course, the car's suspension. Hopefully the suspension does hold up, but you know. We'll take it easy at first, I mean. When you're driving and you notice something in the road, like a pothole, the first thing you obviously do is hit the brakes. So 10 kilometers an hour for starters, and let's go. 10 Ks. At this sort of speed, I really felt that pothole. But at 10 kilometers an hour, absolutely nothing happened to the car. Everything is good, the tires are intact. There was a slight jolt, but that's about it. Right, now let's bring the speed up to 15 Ks and see what happens. Now that was quite unpleasant, not gonna lie. And if you were paying attention, you would have noticed that at 15 kilometers an hour, the tire, well, once it's over the edge, it doesn't go down too abruptly. As in, it covers a bit of distance without touching the ground. But then it strikes the opposite edge, and it actually does a decent job with the damping. Obviously, there's a bit of deformation going on, but it's nothing too hairy. We can safely say that 15 kilometers an hour, I mean, it's not a pleasant feeling. You get a pretty good hit in the suspension, but it's of no danger to the wheel. But let's bring the speed up to 20 Ks. Now we bring the speed up to 20 kilometers an hour. And let's go have a look at the consequences. At a quick glance, it wouldn't appear that anything horrible has happened to the wheel and the tire. Because indeed nothing has happened to them. I mean, the suspension sustained a massive hit, but you couldn't tell by looking at the wheel. Everything looks okay. Alright, 25 kilometers an hour, here we go. That felt even worse. So the higher the speed, the less pleasant it is for the driver. The car takes a good hit, but you'd think it'd be flying over at this point. Well, it's definitely staying in the air for longer, moving further away from the edge of the pothole. But then it strikes the opposite edge. The tire deforms even more, but it is holding up so far. They're doing quite well, actually. The rims themselves are not taking any punishment. And that is nice. 30 kilometers an hour, here we go. That was very unpleasant. It's hissing? Oh, wow, you're right. Where, though? In the back. Oh, holy cow. Take a look at that. But where's the air? Where's it coming from? Oh, from the other side. Look at that. At a speed of 30 kilometers an hour, we had an incident. The rear wheel... You'd think the front axle is under more load, but damage was sustained by the rear wheel. So up front, I'm not noticing any sort of damage. How does that work, though? So this is an interesting development. Hopefully everybody noticed. Anyway, at 30 kilometers an hour, the front wheel came right over. It didn't even touch the surface initially. Then it does, of course, it hits the edge. My guess is that the independent front suspension made for a better outcome. You would have seen how the wheel moved around, and the front suspension bushings obviously played some kind of part, providing a bit of extra damping. Because the tire was almost fully compressed, though there was still just a tiny bit of cushioning left. So the impact wasn't quite making it to the metal rim. As for the rear axle, well, the axle itself is a live axle and the wheel is hard-mounted to it. The spring isn't quite as stiff, and though the wheel does fly over part of the pothole, eventually it does slam into the sharp edge, bending the rim, and even if the rim itself were more rigid, then the tire would have been damaged. But with this car having such an awesome front suspension, I mean, it is a Lada. Let's bring the speed up even higher, by another 5 kilometers an hour, bringing the total speed up to 35. Okay, let's get the speed up to 35. There we are, 35. Holy cow. That was very nasty. You did straighten this wheel out, right? It got bent. Though we're not losing any air, which is nice. And what do we got up front? Up front, everything is peachy. How does that work? Which wheel got bent, do you think? The rear? Why? Chicken thigh. No, seriously, why do you say so? Why did the rear wheel bend and not the front? The front is able to sort of skim over the pothole, while the rear just falls right into it. Nope. That doesn't sound right. That's not the reason. It doesn't really even fall. The rear? It doesn't fall in quite as deep as the front. We have a live axle in the rear, and it is carrying quite a bit of inertia. It's all down to weight. The weight of the axle. The wheel isn't able to set it back up, while up front you have less unsprung weight compared to the rear axle. And so there you go. Someday when you damage your back wheel, you'll remember this little segment we filmed. Okay, it's time to bring the speed up some more. Let's try 40 kilometers an hour. That was painful. That was very painful indeed. It's all immediately apparent. As soon as I step out, the rear wheel is bent, which doesn't come as a surprise. Wouldn't be the first time that happened. But up front, it's all good. We're all waiting like, when is something going to happen to the front wheel? Anyway, let's bring the speed up some more. Excellent, take a look at that. At this sort of speed, I didn't even feel that big of a jolt. There was no big impact. The rear wheel hasn't been bent, and neither has the front. Because at this sort of speed, the suspension didn't sustain a hard impact, and it felt as if we went over a very minor bump. One that a car would barely even notice. 50 kilometers an hour, and we appear to be flying over this sort of bump. But let's have a look at the video footage. Let me try 60 kilometers an hour. That was about 57. Just as we expected, that ended well. Neither of the wheels got bent. But let's try bringing the tire pressure down, and at the more dangerous speeds of around 30 to 35 kilometers an hour, give this another try. Okay, let's try this out and see what happens. Okay, let's try this on the wrong tire pressure. The speed is around 35 km/h. Yeah, this sort of speed, and I hear a hissing noise. Holy cow, this is bent way worse now. What about up front? It's intact? For real? And that is the power of unsprung mass. It is a massive factor. At low pressure, lower than normal, you see what's up? The wheel has gotten bent way worse this time around. And I mean substantially worse. This goes to show you that you'd better keep track of your tire pressures. So look here, guys, we've removed the front wheel, and this is something we weren't able to see. And this would appear to be a consequence of that last run when the tire pressure was low. The edge of that pothole is angled towards the inner portion, and that's what the result is. Okay, so we bent the front wheel as well then. Anyway, check this out. These steelies are made well out of steel, which is a somewhat soft material that is prone to bending. As we can plainly see, it does nothing to the actual rubber. But now we have got some alloys on there. The front is a 14, and in the back we have a 13. This one is running 2 kilos of pressure exactly as specified, 1.8 in the back. And alloy wheels can be bent, it's just way more difficult to do so. And so let's get up to the most hazardous speed. We know it to be about 30 to 35 kilometers an hour, somewhere in that range. We'll keep the pressures where they should be, drive over that pothole, and see what becomes of the wheels and tires. And maybe even the suspension. Let's go. Okay, alloy wheels, same pothole. Nominal tire pressures, the most dangerous speed. And here we go. There it is. That really hurt. Even the sound you hear when you're inside the car. What's up? We good? Front wheel. Everything looks all right? Those are alloys for you. Those are alloys for you indeed. Crucially, the tires weren't even cut. Now, some people opt for alloys because they're supposed to be more durable, and I'd say this test proves that they are. You would have seen the rubber compress all the way to the wheel. That's when the steelies were bending, but the alloys held up just fine. But the amazing thing is that they haven't even chopped the rubber. And that is very good. But you remember how when the pressures were slightly low, things went south to an extent. And so I suggest we let some air out of these tires, leave the pressure at a reasonable number that would allow the car to drive around, but where you'd want to avoid hitting potholes. Let's call it 1.5 kilos for the rear wheel and say 1.6 for the front. Right? Or maybe 1.8. 1.7. Whatever, 1.6 it is then. Okay, so alloy wheels, slightly low tire pressure. The speed is at... That is so nasty. I mean... What do we got? In the rear... Oh, wow, this is durable. Same can be said about the tire, which hasn't been cut. It's all looking good, Sergey. How does this even work? Didn't cut the rubber. We didn't see anything wrong at first, but our experience tells us that we need to check... Yep, it has been bent. The inner portion of the rim has been bent, but the tire hasn't been cut. Yeah, from here you can definitely tell that the wheel is crooked. So even this alloy wheel gave in. But then it was under tremendous stress. It was a big hit. And as for where this brings us, basically you need to pay attention while driving. And always keep track of your tire pressures. Otherwise, you might be dealing with these sorts of consequences. Who'd want to damage their alloy or even steel wheel? And especially cut their tire. And while we're on that topic, when an inexperienced driver sees a pothole, say they're traveling at high speed and obviously they're going to hit the brakes. The car isn't able to shed all of that speed, and said driver would be inclined to stay on the brake pedal all the way to the pothole and hit it while still braking. That is a lot of load exerted onto the front tires. And what can happen to the wheels in that sort of situation? Well, let's find out. I'm gonna accelerate and hit the brakes right before the pothole to put all of that load onto the front tires. Hopefully it survives, and let's do this. Here we are, driving along, minding our own business, and all of a sudden we see a pothole. We braked, but forgot to release the pedal. It's hissing. What's the cause? The wheel? Wait, but we're running alloys. How can this be possible? It's the front. The front? That sounds about right, but what's the deal? That was a massive hit. And here's the hole. Holy cow, it punched right through. There's the hole. Meanwhile, the wheel isn't bent. Yeah, let's turn the wheel and see what that side of it looks like. Nah, keep going. It is totally crooked, Sergey. Yep. How's that possible? I have no idea. I probably didn't notice the first kink initially. In total, we have 3. 2 up top? Exactly. How did that happen? No. The first time we examined this wheel, we didn't see any kinks, but we did see them the second time. Maybe it was there before? It could have been, you might be right. So this is fairly interesting. It's whistling because we put some more air into it. Once this took a hit, a bubble formed right here. And due to the fact that this alloy wheel is way more durable compared to a steely, the tire was cut. But what if we were to try fitting a 14-inch wheel, a steely, with a relatively thin profile tire, and hit that pothole while braking, just like we did with this wheel? Alright, let's try it out and see what happens. Okay, here we go. car just leaned left. I take it the wheel is gone? That is one hell of a kink. And I think you broke the car. Yeah, the car is broken. I have broken it. Oh my, for real? Something has fallen apart. The suspension arm was ripped out. I sort of knew, but I hoped it wouldn't come down to this. It's the sway bar. And a suspension arm. Business as usual. Shouldn't have braked. Before a pothole, you are absolutely correct. Yeah, you are totally right. So look here, guys, the damage is really serious. The wheel is toast. Upon impact, all of the air escaped. The steering wheel was even ripped from my hands. While the tire was sliding over the pavement, it was torn. But that's not even the worst part. The bolts that hold the suspension arm to the subframe have also been torn out. Ultimately, the wheel and the car have sustained such damage that, there's no way to keep on driving. So yeah, guys, if you're braking coming up to a pothole, doesn't matter the speed you're carrying, you're better off releasing the brake pedal. If you don't want this to happen to you. What's there to even say here? Always pay attention when driving, keep track of the condition of your wheels in your car, maybe even take an extreme driving course. And hopefully our road construction services will one day fix the roads we drive on. And that's all I got for you. Catch you guys later.